Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stefanie Michele, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Steph.
We are in the same time zone for the first time. Well, not the first time, but
first time recording.
Yes. Sarah's in New York. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna. All right, I feel compelled because we were going to talk about rejection today, but Sarah, I feel like you've been far away for a few weeks. Like I feel like you've been moving and you're in transition. We haven't really been talking that much, and you came online this morning and you're like, I'm just really disoriented and kind of discombobulated. I missed my alarm. And I was like, let's do a podcast episode about that because I feel really in touch with that feeling, not at the moment, but just as a generalized state of being that I think is actually that space is so hard. It was always a binge trigger for me, and it's still a trigger for me for anxiety. And it's hard to even name what this is, but I feel like it's really relevant to people.
Yeah.
So I'm pushed Sarah to talk about it today.
I didn't take much pushing. I think it's a great subject and we get to talk about me. I could use this like a therapy session or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's something about being outside of your routines, being outside of environments, and so many things about ourselves and our lives that make us feel more like ourselves. We don't even know what we're going to call this episode yet, because actually trying to narrow down what this is not as straightforward as it sounds, but hopefully we'll get to it by the end of the episode.
It might be clarifying. I think that's why it's hard, because it's so hard to name what this is. It feels very vague. And it's like a fish. My kids have one of these toys where you hold it. It looks like a cylinder, but it's squishy. And when you pick it up, it falls. You squeeze it, like when you apply pressure to hold it, it squeezes right out of your hand. It feels like that.
Yeah. For me, it's about connection to myself. It's about identity as well. And I was saying just before we started recording, in the lead up to the move, because there was boxes everywhere, I wasn't doing my Yugal. wasn't doing
my Yugal.
I wasn't doing my Yugal. I wasn't doing my usual yoga practice. And on the Friday when I left my home, it was a hard move. I've moved a lot in my life, but this one felt particularly tough. And I went to stay with a friend, and I went up and did some yoga and getting back on the mat, because I was so conscious that leaving where I was living, I was technically homeless. Didn't have a home address because I've left my previous flat. I've come to New York for a few weeks, and then I need to figure out where I leave. So my car's full of stuff, like some hobo. I put stuff in storage as well. But when I got to my friends and I got on the mat and I did my yoga, I had that feeling of home. And I was saying to Steph, somewhat tongue in cheek, but actually very genuinely as well, that feeling of home is inside us. Sometimes places and things we do help to invoke that feeling. But for me, there was something about coming home. Well, coming home to myself was how it felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, right now, and I don't know how often you get this, Steph, but quite often I'll get clients tell me, and certainly my own experience as well, going on holiday, sometimes food gets easier. You're outside of your routine. I think as well with holidays, though, you're eating out quite a lot. So you're not having to think and prepare. You can really sit down and have a pleasurable experience and choose what it is that you want to eat. And so being away from home, there's a little bit of a sense of, I was going to say without getting too existential, but with getting very existential, of who am I in New York?
Yeah.
I can be anyone I want to be.
Have you figured it out yet? You've only been there like a day or two.
Yeah, a day and a half. I've not even been here 48 hours yet. And, this conversation as well was inspired because I think I slept through my alarm. I had earplugs in. So I woke up less than half an hour before we were recording the podcast. And so I haven't done my yoga this morning. I don't know how to use the coffee machine here, so I haven't had a coffee. And so I was feeling really disoriented. There's this crazy thing in New York where the heating in your building can be controlled by some elusive building manager. So there's heat blasting out, but I've had to shut the windows, and there isn't a button to turn heaters off. And I know this is the case because I saw it on the reviews for the Airbnb, but what is that, Steph? Before we go any further, what is that?
What, you don't have that scenario in London?
No, you can. What would it take to put a button on these heaters just to turn them off? And then the building manager can do whatever the hell he wants. She wants. They want. Want to be inclusive.
I don't know. Maybe it's a way that they control so you don't, maybe, I don't know. I don't think it's like that everywhere. But maybe it's an older building. No, it can't be older than in London. I don't know. It's a way that they're trying to control you, Sarah.
Yeah. And I felt like as well, when I got here, there was that first day was very disorienting. I just felt like I was getting it wrong everywhere. And I was going to ask you a couple of etiquette questions, Steph. I might ask you after the podcast, but I think I annoyed my cab driver. The guy at the coffee shop was super grumpy. And I was like, what have I done wrong? I feel like I've done something wrong and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then I went into Starbucks on 8th Avenue, 6th Avenue, a number of an avenue in New York. And you had to order on the app. You couldn't just go to the counter to order. And so I tried to download the app, but it says it's not available in my region because I've got a UK phone. So I couldn't even order a drink. And I felt so other and outside of something.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find the word. And that's why I think we might struggle to title this episode, because I don't know what the word is. It's like disconnection, but it's like, who am I? How am I supposed to be? I spent ages in the supermarket just trying to figure out what stuff was. Like, why is the cheddar so orange? Is it cheddar? Isn't it cheddar? And then you guys put colouring in cheddar. And I'm like,
I know.
I'm so confused.
I didn't realize that you didn't have yellow cheddar. Maybe that comes from the American cheese yellow. Yeah, maybe that's where they got it from. I wouldn't have even recognized these things. I'm finding myself, as I'm listening to you, very torn between wanting to give you a hug and be like, oh, and protect you from these things, and also that I'm absorbing some of it and that I'm also feeling it. It's very difficult to not feel what you're feeling.
I am feeling better. So last night I went out to a meetup, and that was really good. And I had a really good time
on it.
Oh yeah, I knew I had to be. I knew I had to come and hit the ground running. Whilst I was in that still flush of excitement, needing to get out and meet people as well. And I've actually arranged about 4 social things, considering I came to New York without knowing anyone. My diary's filling up, Steph.
I think that's fascinating. I would be in my bed giving myself about a week to like feel safe enough to come outside and join the world.
Oh, and the temptation's there, don't get me wrong. But my fear is if I did that, I wouldn't come out again. I don't know if once I became that person in New York, Steph, to kind of loop back to the subject that we're not really sure what we're talking about.
What?
Just knocked over a massive glass of water that's just rolled around the room, just spilling water everywhere. And I just watched it. I'm not even going to try and save
I wish this was video. I mean, it is if you watch it on YouTube, but I just really enjoyed it. I watched it. Like, you really are an observer.
I sort of thought, yeah, that's about right with the morning I'm having. That's about right. Just watching this.
Watch it.
Glass roll around. And
do you need to go get a towel?
It's a wooden floor. It'll be fine.
Let's talk about that etiquette.
Am I supposed to get a towel in New York?
You don't want to damage those wood floors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we'll just keep going then.
I guess so. But in the lead up to moving, food was quite stressful, actually. I thought about this at the time because with everything being out of sync, with not getting my usual deliveries that I was getting as well, there was a lot of kind of grabbing food on the fly and making decisions that at the time I was like, man, could have, and this is just what was going on in my head at the time. I hear it. Oh, could have done better than that. And I was just very conscious of that. And I was thinking about it and I thought there's no catastrophization, but there was something as well about because life felt like it was on hold during that move, that nothing counted. So I remember when I was making food decisions, this whole kind of, well, it doesn't matter anyway, because like everything's so messed up. It doesn't matter what I eat. It doesn't matter. So there was a bit more, there was some stress eating going on. It wasn't compulsive as such. And there wasn't a huge amount of guilt. There was kind of, just a little voice in your head going, I could have done better. And I was like, well, I'm not, because I don't feel like myself and I don't know what's happening with life and I don't care. But that was an interesting feeling for me, because that I don't care had shadows of the past, had shadows of how food has been before. It wasn't the whole hitting the F it button as such, but it was a real sense of I'm not going to try. Yeah. But I'm going to be okay with myself about that. Yeah.
I think that's important, because I think someone listening might be like, how would you stay on this side of of the binge then if you had that sensation of that? Because if you get into the effort, mentality, that's a quick switch for some. So how do you embody both?
It's compassion. It's because there wasn't any catastrophization going on. I guess
How do you not catastrophize?
well, because I'm just a lot nicer to myself these days. I really do give myself a break. And remember, I was doing quite a big thing here. I'd not done that before, moved out of somewhere without anywhere to go. Going to be off somewhere for 7 weeks, miles away from home, miles away from anybody that I knew.
Hey.
People have said this to me, and I'm like, yeah, but Steph's got a very busy life. She's working, she's got her kids. And you sent me that lovely message the other day, which I really did appreciate. So just for the benefit of the listener, Steph sent me, in fact, I'm going to get my phone out and I'm going to read it just so you guys can see what a nice person she is, just in case you were having any doubts. She's all right. Don't care what they say about you, Steph. You are all right. So Steph says, I also want to let you know that if at any moment you need to change of environment or company, you can take the train to my house any day, no notice required. It's always open, in brackets, with fresh sheets. That's not easy to say. So I really did appreciate that message. And I told loads of people, oh, Steph sent me this lovely message and I really appreciate it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I mean it.
I know, and I believe you mean it. I believe you mean it.
Yeah. I know that if you just feel like I need to get out right now, just say I'm coming.
Yeah.
The sheets really are fresh.
I believe you. I've been to your house.
Refrigerator's organized. But wait, you were going with something. You were telling a story. Oh, you're miles away from everyone. You had compassion for that. And that keeps you from catastrophizing. Because
I had moments where I thought to myself, you should be handling this better. And then I caught it because I was like, oh, should I? Should I be handling better? That's the thing, is I was trying not to get in a conflict with myself about it, because there's an idea in my head of how I wanted to handle it. And that is to be super excited. My word for this year was risk, right? You heard it here first, guys. That was the word. Yeah. And that was part of the inspiration to do this. I thought, this is taking a risk. And it was disappointing not to feel more excited about it, because it was more a sense of fear, overwhelm, that whole kind of trying to manage this uncertainty, having these thoughts about, if something goes wrong. So I kept running this scenario in my head of, well, what if I'm out and about and I get mugged? And I don't have my keys, and I don't have my phone, and I don't have my cards. I wouldn't be able to contact anyone. I wouldn't be able to get into the building. There would be nowhere I could get to. Whereas in London, that could happen anywhere. It could be a long walk, but I could walk to somebody that I knew.
So what would you do? What if?
Exactly. So
no, I mean it.
Yeah, I know. I don't. Believe me. So one thing, I put my keys in my pocket, in a different pocket to everything else, because I thought muggers aren't going to want my keys. And also, everyone's been trying to scare the hell out of me about New York and how dangerous it is. And don't get the subway after 7 p.m. And I got the subway home last night and it was fine.
Yes. It's all hearsay.
Although I did cry on the subway last night.
Oh, why?
I know I might cut this out of the podcast because it was a really weird thing that happened. So I'm sitting on the podcast and there's a guy.
You're sitting on the podcast?
That's not what you call it here. I'm sitting on the subway and there's a couple, and he's got a stick and his trouser leg is pulled up, and every time the train jolts, he's clutching his leg and he starts shouting and swearing. He was getting really angry with the train driver because he was clearly in a lot of pain. The woman's holding her face because she's clearly distressed by the amount of pain that he's in. And then a couple of stops go by and his anger just turns into whimpers, and he's just whimpering in pain with all of this. And I just started crying because this guy, I feel really emotional thinking about it. This guy was in so much pain, and then he would switch to anger again. And he would get really angry, and like sometimes it's quite scary when you're somewhere and there's just somebody like yelling and swearing and mother effer and all of this kind of stuff going on. You don't know what's going on for that person. And he would just keep switching between this whimpering and this rage. And I remember just thinking, gosh, I prefer the rage because the whimpering was just so heartbreaking. And I think what I'm seeing in New York, which I don't see in London, I'm just seeing so much misery. And I don't know, it's obviously there in London. I'm not saying everyone in London's really happy, but there just seems to be so much. Well, there's more homelessness, I think, certainly more apparent, and just a lot of people really suffering. And I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know what it is that it provoked in me. It provoked something in me that got really big and existential about all the pain in the world suddenly. I felt on that subway on the way home.
I think there is a difference in New York because it's changed. I've noticed over the past couple of years, but also when you're in a new environment, you're picking up on so much more. Where at home, but I think when you're in your environment, everything becomes background. It's just so familiar that you're not paying attention. And when you're in a new place, your nervous system's picking up on everything. And it will look to you know, what's wrong maybe before what's right, especially if you're already feeling a sense of discombobulation. So you might be just really high sensitivity to noticing everything like that. That was right in front of your face. I'm just saying
Yeah.
outside of that situation.
Yeah, and actually what it's making me think of is just life transitions in general, and the amount of times when I have moved somewhere or something in my routine has changed, and I would say to myself, right, when this change happens, everything's going to be different with food. I'm going to be a different person. This is how I'm going to be once I'm living in that place, once I'm working with these people, whatever it is that I think, once I take up that gym membership, whatever it would have been back then. And I was so conscious before coming to New York of not doing that, of not being, oh, I can be, this is how I'm going to be in New York. It was very much like, I don't know how I'm going to be in New York. I might be in my bed and thinking, I don't want to go outside. Everything's too scary and big and unfamiliar. By taking that expectation off myself, I think I really did myself a favor, because there isn't any judgment of that this should be a certain way. I think my expectations were pretty open, which has probably been more disorienting in a way, but it's been less, I can't think of the right word, but it's the idea of when you create this expectation and then not hitting that expectation and then just thinking everything's terrible.
Yeah.
So I thought I might get to New York and I might feel completely disconnected from everyone. Fine. I'll write another book. I'll do something. I'll just, go off and do something if I don't feel connected here. So I'd not made my peace, but I'd accepted that as a possibility. If you want connection and support around any of the topics we talk about on the podcast, we would love for you to join our membership community.
Members have access to monthly online support groups, a private Facebook group, live episode recordings, and member-only Q&As.
If you would like to join us, please head to lifeafterdietspodcast.com/community.
Now let's get back to the episode. What are you feeling right now?
A little bit disconnected, a little bit like I'm not sure where this conversation is going. There's part of my mind going, how helpful is this to the listeners?
Well, those are thoughts, which is interesting because you feel first, no?
You're quite right, I think. And part of me is going, yeah, I know that. That's what I say to my clients all the time. How do I feel? Disoriented was one. None of the big ones are coming up. So I'm going through my head. I don't feel fear. I don't feel shame. I don't feel guilt or anything like that. I just feel maybe confusion.
Yeah.
To some degree. Maybe almost I feel like between spaces, between feelings.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a bit vulnerable.
How do you know physically that you're feeling those things?
Vulnerability kind of feels a little bit like tight clothing to me. Like
Okay.
everything just feels a little bit contracted, like I'm wearing a jacket that's a little bit too tight. Confusion is more of a sort of a rippling, just sort of unsettled feeling in my body. The disorientation feels more like it's in the mind because it's trying to scramble for something useful, something. That's where the story comes in of we're recording a podcast and we're supposed to create content that's helpful for people who are recovering from disordered eating. And so it needs to be, it's that pressure.
The human element is incredibly helpful. I could take this in a direction when I'm so inclined to, but I also want to respect your feelings on that and making it useful. But I wanted to go into the sensory piece of that and getting out of your straitjacket or moving, because you started to twist. You started to go like that, like as if you were trying to get out of it. And I'd invite you to do so. Give yourself a stretch. Maybe
I
see
can
what
stretch.
It does.
Yeah. I don't really want to stand up because I overslept, so I'm wearing my pajamas from the waist down.
It's such a human element show.
Exactly.
But yeah. I'll give you a minute to do that. I think it does tie around to the food stuff, because this is a moment where food, I don't know how you would feel about it, but to me, if I was in that place and whenever I've been in the place you're describing, food is so easy to use as a point of orientation because it's like, oh, I know how to. I was thinking about this yesterday, how food was such a constant coping mechanism for decades that it, e- eating was the one thing when I was in London and felt this way, not when I visited you back in the day. That I could go to. It was like, I know what to do with this. I know what this will do to me. I know how to be with food. It's the one thing that I can relate to everywhere. And so it can be a way out of that feeling. And so I'm wondering how that shows up or if it doesn't show up.
What's coming to mind actually is on my penultimate night in my flat. Everything was boxed up and the movers were going to come the following morning. I'd already decided in advance. I was thinking, I'm going to order a Domino's pizza. It's my last night eating in the flat because the next night I was going to go out. I'm going to have a Domino's pizza and I'm going to order their cookies and it's going to be great. It's not something I would have done very often. And I was looking forward to it. And the night came on Wednesday and I went to order it and I was like, I really don't want it. And I was really sad that I didn't want this sort of Domino's pizza and cookies. So I think there was something about that was going to be an emotional experience. And it was going to be about, it's really hard to find the right words because obviously that's not something that I would do every day. So there was something about the sort of special occasionness of that. And then I was thinking, oh, does that mean I normally have to justify it to order that? And then there was like, oh, I don't have the energy to overanalyze this and go down that road. Of course, it's fine to order a Domino's and the cookies. I probably wouldn't order that on my own had it not felt like a very conscious choice because it just would have felt a little bit too close to something not fun from the past. But I was really disappointed about not wanting it because I really thought that was going to bring me some comfort. But I just didn't want it.
So what'd you do?
I went to, funny enough, do you remember it would have been for the podcast 2 weeks ago, where we were talking about loving food too much. And
Yes.
I'd said how I'd gone to M&S and I'd had these pesto pasta and the prawns with the Thousand Island sauce, but I was fed up of it.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted.
That's what you had?
Yes, I went and had that again.
Guess that came back around.
I knew it needed to be something with zero preparation because there was just nothing in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Everything was packed up. So that was what I wanted, but it wasn't, again, I didn't really enjoy it. And actually, I found food hard to enjoy during this phase. And I think that's one of the reasons why actually it was more challenging. And editing the podcast episode on loving food too much, I did that yesterday. We talked a lot about actually increasing pleasure in food. For me, certainly has a more naturally moderating effect. And so struggling to find that pleasure in food was, I'm not going to say disappointing because I actually think it's a really helpful thing. But at the time, it was like I couldn't find anything that could relieve these feelings that I was not enjoying.
But also in that episode, I remember we talked about how, and I think I was talking about it in the context of guilt, like we can't relax into food and find satisfaction when guilt is present. And in this case, I think the same thing would apply to tension and anxiety or fear, because it's that more fight or flight state. It's more of a defensive position. So you're not in that connected space. And we need to be connected to feel pleasure and joy. So if you didn't have access to that in general at the time, I can understand why that would have been an elusive thing to find. I'm wondering now, in the present, where your attitude towards food is, because I think I would expect it to feel differently in the height of the preparation and the lead up, the crescendo of all of this, and now you've arrived, and it's kind of like it's a different character when you're on the other side of it. I don't know if it feels harder or not, but where food could even take on a different role there.
It's tricky and it's all over the place. And when I flew out on Thursday, I got to Heathrow and I went and I had a nice hearty breakfast and I really enjoyed the breakfast. And I had that moment actually where everything's done. I'm about to get on the plane. I did it. And it was a moment and I thought to myself, because someone sent me a message actually and they said, oh, how are you feeling? And I stopped and I thought, how am I feeling? And as I sat there with my shakshuka breakfast, I thought, grateful, actually. I was feeling grateful. And it was really nice to feel that feeling and to acknowledge that was the feeling I was feeling. And then 2.5 hours later on the plane, they serve lunch because I'm still full from breakfast. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have lunch because I didn't take any food on the plane. And I thought about it at the time. There was something around just giving up the control or having to decide. I'm just going to take whatever I'm given on the plane, and that's okay. It was almost like for me in that moment, it was like this surrendering of, I'm not going to make any food decisions really for the next 8 hours on this flight. They're just going to be made for me. And then yesterday was a bit confused. So I'd gone to the supermarket and I had bought, well, first of all, the night before, I bought a tuna wrap just to grab something for dinner because I didn't have food in. And it didn't taste like tuna. It tasted weird. Everything tastes weird here. So I didn't enjoy it. I ate half of it. And then the following morning, I was like, okay, I'll have the other half. And it was at lunchtime. And again, I didn't enjoy it, but I still ate it because I bought it. And I think for me, there was just too much tuna compared to wrap. So I felt like I was just eating.
Yeah.
I was like, what's that all about?
Yeah.
Stefanie,
Yeah.
what's that all about?
It's America. It's we give you a lot.
I
We
know,
pack it in.
I know, but then the ratios were all wrong.
I agree. I remember I had a friend who moved here from Europe in high school, and she was like, "You and your sandwiches." She's like, "It's more meat than bread." And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, "Oh, is that not normal?" And then, yeah, I take most of that out.
Does it feel like, oh, you take most of it out, so it doesn't feel like if you come to the UK, you feel hard done by?
No, because I prefer it the way you do it.
Yeah, it's all about
It's
ratio.
actually more to my liking. I'm actually a European at heart.
Yeah, I think you are, just in your attitude. You're quite un-American.
I've been told that by this same European friend.
Yeah.
Still, you're talking still about the past. I'm wondering, in this current moment, you hungry?
No.
Okay.
And I grabbed a banana before we recorded, so I would have breakfast, but because I overslept, I didn't. And yesterday, when I went into town, the meetup was in town between 6 and 8. So I went in a couple of hours earlier to have a wander around. And then I thought, I don't know if people are going to be ordering food at this meetup. And so I was wandering from place to place, trying to find somewhere to eat, and nothing, like not really knowing what to do with myself because I wasn't hungry, didn't know what I fancied. So in the end, I didn't eat before I went to the meetup. And when I got home, it was about 9:30 and I still hadn't eaten and I still wasn't hungry at all. And this happened when I came to you in New Jersey.
Yes.
And I think it's just the time zone screws everything up. But I thought, I want a really good night's sleep. And obviously I did have a good night's sleep. I think I slept for like 10 and a half hours, something ridiculous last night, maybe longer than that. So I had some peanut butter on toast before I went to bed. And again, I didn't really enjoy it, but I thought, I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night hungry. I want to sleep through. So that's quite unusual to eat for me, like literally 20 minutes before I was going to bed. But it just seemed like a very wise thing to do.
Practical.
Yeah, practical and wise. So today, again, like I don't really know. I feel like my meal times are all over the place. Everything's all over the place. There's no routine. And that's okay at the moment. I feel less unsettled than I did before I left London. For sure.
Less unsettled. Okay. What do you need today?
It really feels like a session. What do I need today? So I'm going to a network event this afternoon. So what do I need? I need to just show up for myself. And before I went to the meetup last night, there was some nervousness, more than I would normally get if I was going to meet up in London, which I sometimes do. And I remember having a thought of, because it was a self-conscious feeling. When I go into a social situation like that, I remind myself that this is not about me. Because it's easy to slip into that place of, oh, what will people think of me? Will I connect with anyone? Am I going to be rejected? Which is why when you said, let's talk about rejection today, I was like, yeah, actually, that feels quite prevalent for me at the moment as well. And then I remembered, actually, not just make it about others, but it's something about bringing the focus outside of myself and onto other people. It's a reminder to be curious, because when I get self-conscious, it all becomes about me. And I forget to be curious about other people. So I think it's a reminder to go in and just be curious.
Okay.
I took that with me and went in with that, and I didn't put the pressure on myself. If I'd gone in feeling self-conscious because it was a discussion group, when I had a thought, it would be more important for me to say it and get that thought out. Everyone needs to hear what I'm thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on this occasion, because I had reset my intention before I went in, so that's what I need to do before I go to this networking thing this afternoon, is to remember it's not about what do people think of me. It's about being interested in other people and wanting to connect. And when I hold on to that, I'm okay.
Okay. I love it. Curiosity and connection, your C's. What's the other one?
Exactly. Compassion.
Yeah, which we covered.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's taken that pressure of like, oh, this is how I want to show up and this is what it needs to look like. all that visualization stuff, you know, if you were going to something and you should visualize how you want it to go and how you want to be. I always found that really unhelpful because my visualization would be this super ideal version of how I would want something to go. And then it would never live up to that. And then I'd feel like I hadn't done it right.
Yeah.
And I also need to make a decision about whether I'm going to message a guy back from last night.
What?
This doesn't happen in the UK, right? This doesn't happen in the UK. It would be you talk to someone, you'd both look at each other a bit awkwardly, and then you go and you'd never see each other again because no one would actually say anything. And here in New York, they just give you a card and they're like, no, just call me and I'll take you out. And I'm like, all right.
Any body image come up since you've been here?
Yesterday when I was going to this meetup, there was a whole, what do I wear? What do I wear? And at one point I thought about dressing up a bit more, putting on something smarter. And I thought to myself, what would you wear if you were going to something similar in London? And I was like, probably just my yoga pants.
Yeah.
So I did. I just went in my yoga pants and
Good.
trainers.
Oh, I love it.
And he's there in a three-piece suit with a handkerchief in his pocket. I felt like a complete scruff bag next to him.
You have your accent too. That's nice.
I know, exactly. Back home, I'm a 6, but here I'm an 8.
I love that you wore the yoga pants.
Yeah.
Did you feel comfortable in them once you were in them, or did you have any consciousness about it when you were there?
I had a little bit of consciousness about it when I was there. You know, we're in a nice bar and I'm there in trainers and yoga pants. But I was thinking, I just want to be comfortable. I just want to wear what feels like me. And I just assumed again, and I thought, I can't keep second guessing this etiquette stuff. I don't know. Like in London, it's just wear whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can go out on a Saturday night and there will be people very dressed down and people very dressed up in the same place and it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Did you not find that here?
Yeah, I did actually. I think it was quite similar. I might have been the most casual in gym wear.
Well, if I'd been with you, I would have done the same with you. I think New York's a good place as opposed to maybe if you were in LA or something like that, or DC. You would have had to wear a collared shirt, something more professional. But New York's a good choice. Yeah. I didn't mean to turn this into a Sarah, like that you had to carry so much of it. I had other things to say, but it was just really compelling to follow your story and the state of your emotions because it's relatable. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody if you made it to the end. Thank you.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, now I want to hear about this. So bye-bye.